You're listening to NAPAbroadcasting.com.
Thanks for joining us here at Napa Broadcasting. The Napa Valley stands as perhaps the most environmentally regulated agricultural region in the United States. Yet in a place where agriculture is the highest and best use of the land, where agriculture's success should be celebrated at a time when farmers across California and America struggle, there is today a political resentment against the Valley's success. In part, it's a misguided belief that it's a business of the one percenters versus the reality of those families that have toiled for years to make their vineyards a success. Perhaps it's a reflection of the special place that wine has in our culture. And perhaps it's a resentment or self-loathing of the success that has made the Valley a world-class community and destination. Whatever the reason, as we saw with the misguided Measure C, we live in an environment where raw politics and the nationally pervasive politics of resentment are driving our land use policies. It's the kind of toxic mix usually driven by the loudest voice in the room that can only result in bad policy and long-term damage. While some industry groups seem to be competing for the Neville Chamberlain Award for their policy of appeasement, the Napa County Farm Bureau, which has reorganized itself in the wake of Measure C, is at least making an attempt to push back. Today we're going to talk about that with my guest Ryan Klobas. He's the CEO of the Napa County Farm Bureau, and it is my pleasure to welcome him here to Napa Broadcasting. Ryan, thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, it's great to have you here. The Farm Bureau has come a long way from the organization that existed 15, 16, 17 years ago in the battles over things like Measure O and Measure P. Between O and P and C, it's been a long journey. Talk a little bit first about the reorganization that has taken place.
So last August, the Board of Directors reorganized in an effort to place really more focus and priority on the policy aspects, political aspects of what's going on in Napa County as it relates to agriculture. Given the restructuring, we have seen a lot of positive reinforcement from the community who has supported what we've done in restructuring, placing a larger focus on policy matters before Board of Supervisors, political aspects in terms of things like, Measure C, and really fighting for agriculture in Napa County and fighting for particularly current generation of farmers and future generation of younger farmers, ensuring that they have an ability to continue farming in Napa County.
One of the things that has happened in all of this, and certainly it is true, and you have a great sense of this, having worked in other parts of the state and in the San Joaquin Valley, that the politics and the public policy become conflated in a way that is not always in the best interests of either.
Yeah, very, very much so. We learned during the Measure C campaign, education was a very big component of trying to not only create sound policy, but also politically try to educate voters about what the initiative actually meant. We're seeing the same thing right now before Board of Supervisors with the watershed protection ordinance discussion. And there's a lot of education that really needs to go into that process in terms of, what does tree canopy cover really mean? What is tree mitigation? How does that work? What's an erosion control permit? How do those work? What are the environmental regulations that a lot of our members have to go through every single day? And so, the argument that we have always made is our members are excellent environmental stewards of the land. They place the environment and the protection of the environment as utmost importance. But politically, we may disagree on how to get there. For example, Measure C. We didn't agree that an initiative was the best way to go about addressing those issues. We always said that the correct venue was before Board of Supervisors, and we still believe that. And so, we're seeing that play out right now, but education is by far the biggest component. And one of Farm Bureau's strengths is, our membership consists of over 700 members, many of whom are farmers, vineyard managers. These are people that do this every single day for a living, understand the process intimately, and have a lot to offer in this process as the Board of Supervisors, wants to continue to make policy on it.
And to what extent is it, in terms of the Board of Supervisors right now, you get the sense that sometimes it's an attempt to find a solution in search of a problem. Do you think that there is a problem? Do your members think there is a problem that needs a solution? Or is this an attempt to find kind of a middle ground that can be politically palatable for everybody?
Yeah. One of the concerns that we've had throughout this entire process has been, if there is a problem with current county conservation regulations, identify it for us and tell us what it is. We've always believed in a very science, evidence-based approach if we're going to change conservation regulations. We believe they're working. We don't believe that there's a problem out there that needs to be addressed at this point. And one of the concerns that we've always had is, as the board begins to go down this path, you don't want to have policy created in an environment where undue political pressure is the catalyst for change. And so that has been one of our, priorities in this entire discussion, is educating the Board of Supervisors and the public about what really goes into the county conservation regulations, why it is that they're working, why Napa County is the most regulated agricultural industry in the state of California. So if there's a problem, let's identify it and let's figure out what it is. But we can't make sound public policy based on, grandiose claims that continually go unsubstantiated. It has to be based on some type of evidence.
But that makes it, of course, much more difficult to educate the public, because they're hearing loud voices on the other side make a lot of claims. Most of them, I would argue, are false, but that because they fit a particular storyline, they fit a particular scenario that people want to believe right now, in terms of that resentment that I was talking about in the introduction, that it's easier for them to make their case and harder to get those facts that you're talking about out there to educate the public.
Absolutely. And, it was one of the biggest concerns that we had during Measure C and right now, which is truly educating the public with independent information, third-party information that is not biased either way, but just simply lays out, how current county conservation regulations are working. Also point out that the last county staff report indicated county conservation regulations are working. So it really is, this is an issue that is very technical and complex in a lot of respects for people to understand. And I understand that. But, as we continue to move forward with it, we're talking about the livelihood of farming in Napa County for future generations to come. And even although this is a complex issue for people to understand, education is by far the biggest component. One of the things I learned during the Measure C campaign, I talked to countless people during that 7-month period. And I noticed that in public venues, when you actually educated people about what was really going on in Napa County with independent facts, not biased in any direction, the people understood that, and people woke up to that, and people realized, there really isn't a problem. And if there is, let's point to one. But I really did experience that a lot of people were very accepting of evidence that we placed in front of them. It was not political. It was strictly based off of independent information that we got from area engineers in Napa County who do this work every day.
Is there a danger of the conversation becoming, I was wondering about this listening to everybody at the Board of Supervisors meeting last week, the degree to which the conversation becomes too much about quote-unquote science. There's the old saying that statistics never lie and liars always use statistics. With respect to some of the science, it's easy, or it's been easy, for both sides to bring arguments to the table. We have to deal in something other than just saying we're dealing in the science. There are certain really objective facts in terms of what's happened, in terms of the Napa River, in terms of erosion, in terms of how the regs have worked successfully in Napa County.
Absolutely. If you look at facts and figures over the last 26-year period, the annual rate of loss of forest in Napa County is 0.1%. The annual growth rate for vineyards in Napa County over the last 26 years is 1.5%. So, it's the reports that the county releases on water quality, the aquifer, everything that goes into this discussion has not indicated a problem yet. And so we were, very genuine in saying, look, if there is an identified problem, we want to address it. It impacts all of us. It doesn't matter what side Measure C you were on. The environment impacts us all. So if there's a problem to identify, let's identify it. But it's very difficult when, you have different sets of facts and figures, and you constantly have to go back to, we're looking for NAPA-specific evidence. It's very easy to give information on a very global scale or national scale. We need NAPA-specific evidence. We're dealing with Napa County, and so we need NAPA-specific evidence to tell us if there's a problem.
The other aspect that certainly came out in Measure C, and I want to get a sense from you of what you hear from your members in this regard, that Measure C, while it was about the environmental regulations and the watershed, that it was also about the industry as a whole, that it was about the growth of the industry, about tourism, about the nature of wineries, that all of those issues get conflated with this environmental conversation, which makes it very difficult to have either conversation.
Yeah, I think a lot of people viewed Measure C as a referendum on growth in Napa County, and it takes into consideration, a lot of different issues: housing, traffic, development across all of Napa County, and those were all issues that we continually said during the campaign and continue to say are very important issues. All of those issues relate to the environment, so let's continue to address everything. And with the current direction the Board of Supervisors is going in terms of the general policy recommendations that they've given, it starts to become very concerning when you have a lot of misinformation that continually needs to be corrected, and we've said all along that all of these issues are extremely important to us. But let's look at all of them, and let's take into consideration all of these issues that impact us, instead of constantly playing to political pressure from groups that have loud voices. And it's not to discount their input, but these are issues that are important to all of us. So let's sit down and just have a meaningful conversation about it.
What is the greatest fear that your members have of this whole process at this point? What do they see as a worst-case scenario?
Worst-case scenario would be overregulation, by far. Unnecessary overregulation. So, it's extremely concerning to our membership that we get to a place where the Board of Supervisors may unnecessarily increase regulation because of political pressure. And so we don't want to be in a situation where now we have increased regulation. Your ability to develop a parcel has now almost come to the point where it's economically unviable. What does that mean for future generations in Napa County? One of the things the Farm Bureau is really, really good at is encouraging a third grader to become a farmer. And so if we're continually putting that message out there and we're saying, hey, farming in Napa County is one of the best industries that you could be in, what does overregulation at this stage today mean for a third grader who wants to become a farmer in Napa County down the road? It would almost be impossible.
It also means, arguably, that only those either with a lot of money or big corporations will be able to afford to farm here.
Yeah, and that has been a concern of ours. And, the small family farmer really does play into a lot of this discussion, especially the Board of Supervisors. If you're looking at small parcels, your ability to develop a small parcel, if you're overregulated, and let's say you have 85% tree canopy cover, it would almost be impossible to try to develop anything on that land that would be viable for you. So the concerns of small family farmers really does come into play here. People who have massive amounts of land are still obviously going to be under whatever regulations the Board of Supervisors comes up with. But we have a real concern about small family farmers who are existing to take care of themselves and their families, and what that means to them. And I think sometimes that gets lost in the discussion because one of the things that I always heard from proponents of Measure C was corporations taking over in Napa County, and the voice of the small family farmer I feel got lost in that discussion. And so that's one of the things that we advocate for, that we fight for. The Napa County Farm Bureau Board of Directors is 18 individuals. At least half of those directors are under the age of 40. So we have a very clear interest in seeing that farming continues for generations in Napa County, and overregulation is going to directly impact that.
Do you see among your members a disagreement or any difference of opinion among those that exists on the valley floor versus those in the hills?
I think the concerns, are universal in the sense that any type of unnecessary regulation is really going to impact you no matter where you're at, to varying degrees. Overregulation is going to directly impact your ability to farm in Napa County. And, the point that we don't want to be at is a point where the Board of Supervisors may be on the verge of creating legislation that, in our opinion, would be far more stringent than Measure C. So there's a real political component to this entire discussion, and we're really hoping that common sense just rules the day.
Isn't the point of that legislation really, though, to create a moratorium without creating a moratorium?
Yeah, it's one of our arguments during the campaign was essentially that Measure C was really about stopping vineyard development, and so there were a lot of different exceptions in that initiative. You could build a house, you could build a wine, you just couldn't plant a vineyard, and so that was a real concern for us, and so I think. Moving forward, our job at the Farm Bureau is to protect the rights of farming in Napa County. And by far, this discussion right now at Board of Supervisors is the highest policy priority that we have.
Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about what you see in terms of this coming up against elections in 2020, where you have 3 members of the Board of Supervisors up for re-election, and the very real possibility of another initiative.
Yeah, so this has been something that we have been really focusing on. So March 2020 is going to be a very unique election year. People talk about how divisive Measure C was. If there is another initiative, coupled with the fact that you have 3 supervisors up for re-election, it changes the political landscape by far. And so it factors into decision-making processes in terms of constantly trying to figure out where agriculture's best interests lie and supporting those interests. But March 2020, by far, that is going to be a difficult battle, and we've placed a lot of priority on that and a lot of resource on that. So moving closer to it, we'll see how things begin to develop. But I'm extremely cognizant of the fact that the political landscape in Napa is going to be very different over the next year in terms of looking at policy. What
does the Farm Bureau hope to do in that context? What do you hope the Bureau to be able to do?
So the Farm Bureau is the only the only industry organization that makes political endorsements in Napa County, and we take that responsibility very seriously, and look at candidates that we believe truly have agriculture's best interests in mind. So that's one way that we're preparing for that. Also, educating the public about not only everything that we're doing right in agriculture, but educating the public about where we believe their vote best goes. And like I said, this having 3 supervisors up for re-election could dramatically change the composition of what the Board of Supervisors looks like. And so that would be over, after March 2020, the next 4-year period. And so that is a very big concern for us. And like I said, we're going to place a lot of priority on it.
And we were talking at the very beginning about how the Farm Bureau has changed in terms of its outlook and the reorganization that happened in the wake of Measure C. In many ways, the organization, it seems, is much more aligned with both the state and national Farm Bureau than it had been previously. To what extent is that an asset to Napa County?
One of the things that I love about the Farm Bureau is the fact that we have this amazing parent organization in Sacramento and one in Washington, D.C. They are by far a very talented group of individuals who provide us tremendous resources. I can pull a subject matter expert on virtually anything related to agriculture from Sacramento without a problem. And having Napa Farm Bureau align for all intents and purposes, we're not always in agreement with everything the state and national farm bureaus do, but they provide us a tremendous resource in terms of policy. Good example was when the Napa grand jury criticized the Williamson Act. The Farm Bureau was an industry organization that had our legal counsel in Sacramento draft a response to that and submit it to the Board of Supervisors, who then submitted it to the grand jury in response. So, it's we take a lot of these issues very seriously. But one of the things that is really wonderful about the Farm Bureau is that we have resources and a network that extends far beyond Napa County. So all of those resources in Sacramento and Washington dramatically help me and the Farm Bureau be effective and do our job.
How do you see the Farm Bureau's profile in Napa County right now? For a while, it didn't have the highest profile. It certainly changed in the past year or two. How do you see it now, and where would you like to take it?
I think Farm Bureau has a very high favorability rating within Napa County. We're the only industry organization that protects all of agriculture. It's not just wine grapes. It's cattle. It's grapes. It's everything related to agriculture. In the time that I've been here, I seriously have seen a very positive shift in the way that people view Farm Bureau. That they very much take Farm Bureau, I think, far more seriously now when it comes to policy and politics than perhaps they did before. And those are all positive indicators that we're doing something right. And so I talk to a ton of people every day. It's very hard, I've noticed now, to not walk down the street or go to a coffee shop without being recognized by a lot of people that are there. But I always get positive feedback. I'll get criticisms from some individuals, but I got to tell you, over 90% of people that talk to me are very supportive of the Farm Bureau and think that the Farm Bureau in the last couple of years has taken a very refreshing approach to policy as it relates to ag in Napa Valley. So I got to tell you, a lot of the feedback that I get is positive. And when you're in a store somewhere and you don't think anybody's going to recognize you, let me tell you, they do, and are happy to offer their opinion. So, but I welcome it, and I think by far it's been great.
What do you hear from your colleagues around the state who look at agriculture in Napa County and the tremendous success that it's had, and see at the same time the constant battles that are going on now? They must be surprised by it, to say the least.
Yeah, I think so. I talked to some of my colleagues. California Farm Bureau has an annual meeting every December, and so you get to see a lot of your colleagues from other parts of the state, and they remark on the battles going on in Napa County as unique, remarkable. Some of my colleagues who are in parts of the state that do have thriving ag industries have told me, but wow, we don't have some of the issues that you have going on. You've got to be pretty busy, and I work. I'm dealing with a lot of these issues easily at least 6-7 days a week, and it's I love it, but by far Napa County has very, very unique issues going on right now. One
of the things that we didn't touch on, and I want to come back to it a little bit in the time we have left, is that these regulations don't exist in a vacuum, that this over-regulation that we've been talking about has a tremendous economic cost to both family farms and even to larger companies.
Absolutely. The county staff report pointed out last week that a lot of landowners in Napa County, it's not just the county regulations that they have to comply with. They have to comply with state regulation, federal regulation. That takes a lot of time, energy, money to comply with. And at the end of the day, especially for small family farmers, you want the industry and you want agriculture to be productive for them, and you want it to be economically viable for them and for their families. And overregulation to a degree that just becomes unreasonable, is going to directly impact small family farmers who are trying to exist and take care of themselves, feed their families. And I think that's something that really gets lost in this discussion is, people may have varying issues with corporations, but you have to look at this in totality, especially Napa County. You have to look at this in totality in terms of, sure, we have corporations that exist and we have small family farmers that exist, and we have to come to a place where everybody can coexist under regulation that makes sense. But I have to tell you, Napa County is by far the most regulated industry, not only in California, has some of the most stringent environmental regulations in the country. And everybody really recognizes that. So as I've gone around the state and talked to people, I'm routinely told, wow, the environmental regulations in Napa County are nothing compared to what we have here. So I think people in our county, should realize that we have great regulations on the books, and they're working, and they're successful.
Has one of the problems, as you see it and as your members see it, been the inconsistency of enforcement of those regulations?
Yeah, I think that's a concern, and I think compliance is definitely a concern. Clearly, you want to see things applied uniformly across the board, but I think the county has been working on that, and I think the county has done a good job so far at addressing a lot of those concerns and trying to come up with some reasonable ways to look at enforcement so that it's uniformly applied. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
What do you think happens if another initiative makes its way onto the ballot in March of 2020 in the context of an election of a majority of the Board of Supervisors?
It's going to depend very much on the substance of that initiative, what it attempts to address, what the issue is. But it's going to be a very big educational effort for the public. It's going to be Measure C last time around was difficult to educate voters about what that initiative. It was 18 pages about what that initiative actually meant. And now, moving forward, the public is going to have to focus on, if there is an initiative, what that is, what that means, and where the three supervisors up for re-election are, and what their thoughts and concerns are. So the public's going to be taking in quite a bit of information.
And one of the things you talked about at the outset is that the Farm Bureau really is a political organization. It has been much more open to taking positions on these things.
Yeah, I mean, the Farm Bureau is, a very policy-driven organization that takes these issues very seriously, and absolutely is willing to step up to the plate and address the issues, endorse candidates, and let its views really be heard. And I think people respect us for that. I get a lot of positive feedback all the time about that. All of the industry organizations are wonderful at doing what it is that they do best. And I think one of the things that Napa County Farm Bureau does best is the policy work of protecting ag in Napa County. And like I said, we've got a tremendous network of resources that helps us do that.
Finally, what did you come away with from all of the comments at the Board of Supervisors meeting last week? I know you spoke briefly yourself. Sat there, I assumed, and listened to everybody else for an entire day.
Indeed. It was refreshing, I think, to see that, a lot of people do care about this issue, and we had hours and hours of testimony. I got there at 9 o'clock in the morning and didn't leave until, I think, 5 o'clock. But I think based off of the comments and the testimony that I heard, I think there is a real education effort that needs to go on here. It's unfortunate when you hear some people cite facts and figures that aren't accurate, and so it becomes concerning. And that's one of the things that we try to do, is point to independent subject matter experts who help us arrive at a lot of this. So as we've been going through this discussion about tree canopy cover and tree mitigation and things like that, this is not just the Farm Bureau Board of Directors discussing this internally. We're inviting area engineers, independent experts into the room to help us make informed decisions about this, so that we can take all of that information and then comprehensively go to the Board of Supervisors and say, look, we invested a lot of time and energy into coming to what we consider to be informed opinions about this, involved a lot of subject matter experts who work on these issues every single day, and we believe that these positions are reasonable. And so that's where we try to counter a lot of the misinformation that's out there.
Is there the money to do that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And we place, like I said, a high priority on that because we learned during Measure C, education was really the issue. It was educating people about what goes on. And so when we would go out and do that, I got to tell you, it was extremely interesting to see when you just for a minute or two educated somebody about what actually goes into getting an erosion control permit, or what does it really take to plant a vineyard. It's not as easy as everybody thinks. Right. So once you go through that process and actually educate people, a lot of people responded to me by saying, well, I didn't know that. So a lot of it really truly is education. But like I said, we're still at that point right now in this discussion with the Board of Supervisors. A lot of these issues are complex, and a lot of these issues require technical knowledge. And that's where we hope to be helpful because a lot of our members have that technical knowledge. They have that experience. They've been doing this for a long time. They do it every day. And that's why I think their input on this is extremely valuable.
Ryan Klobas, CEO of the Napa County Farm Bureau, I thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to NAPAbroadcasting.com. Napa Valley Radio for the way we live now.